back at the Mount Vernon Library. Welcome to Trial by Flavor. I'm Suzanne Butler, and we're cooking my very favorite vegetarian recipe tonight. It's chickpeas and kale in Pomodoro. So we could come up with a better name. And what I had to learn is what is Pomodoro and why isn't it in marinara? Pomodoro is thicker, and that's just about the only difference. It's a red Italian sauce with a whole lot of garlic, and it's thick, and it's chunky, and it's perfect with the kale and the chickpeas. So let's get started. It's got a 1/4 cup of oil, which is kind of a lot, in the scheme of things, but go ahead and use it. Oil is the fat and carries the flavor. And there's no meat in here or anything else that's fat, so it's okay. Garlic comes in 2 different ways. There's a bajillion varieties, but some have a really strong stem in the middle, and all the cloves are around that stem. And then the other kind doesn't have a stem, it's just all the cloves. And chef-y types, people who it matters to whom it matters, say, oh, you always have to use the kind with the stem. I can't tell the difference. But what is kind of something that you might need to pay attention to is, and we've done this a million times, woo, just to peel it. And I was working with this particular head of garlic today, and it sprouted. And again, those people who have a much better palate than mine say that green sprout is bitter. I've not experienced it, but people I really trust say it's so. So I always take it out and then just go on with it. In this dish, instead of mincing it like we've done in all the other dishes, I'm just going to slice it. Garlic is sticky. I think library patrons are going to be very surprised in the morning when they come in. Okay, this has to go up a little bit. You want some sizzle, but we've talked before about burning garlic. Not a good idea. It'll wreck the whole dish. This is 5 cloves of garlic, so it's a lot. There, it's starting. And pretty soon, the aromatics are gonna come bursting out of there. A lot of things like this, these flavor foundations, you can tell with your nose when they're ready. You don't want to brown these guys even. I mean, burning is verboten. Browning is not so good either. Into that, I'm going to put some fennel seeds. And for me, fennel, which is licoricey, is what makes this dish kind of meaty, even though it doesn't have meat in it. It gives it a magnificent flavor, unless, of course, you hate licorice. Then, in which case, you can use cumin. It's a 1.5 teaspoons. If you're going to use cumin, I'd start with a teaspoon of seeds. Woo! Ta-da! Oh, and then it starts singing to me. What I'm going to do to make that stop browning is pour in the tomatoes. And you might say, that's dangerous to have that lid up there like that. And of course it is, so you have to be careful. But in order to recycle the lid, it has to be attached to the can. New recycling information. Okay, we need to go back up again. Oops. Okay, the other thing that goes in here, I think the word spicy is in the title of this recipe too. It calls for a teaspoon of crushed chilies, in which case it's going to be very hot, at least with the crushed chilies I have and I've gotten. So for me, I put about 1/4 teaspoon in, because you can always make things hotter. And you know what your family likes, whether you can just go ahead with a whole teaspoon or not. And then a pinch of salt, maybe a little more than a pinch. And something else that maybe you haven't run into before, this is my very best stash of Parmesan rinds. When you buy a chunk of Parmesan and you get to the end of it, save the rinds in a Ziploc bag and keep them in your freezer. And they just add so much flavor to a sauce like that. And then fish them out, because they're kind of like rubber when you run into them in the dish. But we're going to put Parmesan on it later, but it'll just have that base. It's actually umami, if you want to know. It's the proteiny kind of base. Okay, I'm going to give this to my friend, who's going to take it away and cook it for me. Thank you. Oh, hush. No, I want that on. We're going to serve this on polenta. And I don't know if you're used to polenta, if you eat polenta already. It's so delicious. It's corny, of course. Okay. There's nothing very tricky about it. The only tricky thing is when I bring this to a boil and I pour in the cornmeal, it wants to get lumpy. But you can make that not happen by, this is going to be 4 cups. The ratio of cornmeal to water is 1:4. So you can take a cup of the water cold, like you do cornstarch, and then when it boils, I can just pour it in, and it won't want to lump up. Polenta is cornmeal. It's in Italy. There are different coarsenesses. Really fine ground, up to pretty lumpy, up to grits kind of texture. This happens to be from Bob's Red Mill, which is real available at home. I use that, that box of cornmeal that your granny had and your mom had. That's what I use, and it's very fine. It cooks really quickly, is why I use it. I like it mushy, but I didn't have an Italian grandmother. I had a Kansas grandmother. And at her house, we had fried corn mush for breakfast. Maybe that's why I like the finer ground, although authentically it would be coarser. And this is coarse. They still call it cornmeal. I think the Bob's Red Mill has stuff called polenta, and I haven't looked at it to see what the difference is. But this is coarse cornmeal. I mentioned grits. Grits is ground corn that's treated with lye, like masa, that they make tamales and tortillas and stuff out. But there's some difference there, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. But it's treated. And a lot of people like grits with, grits would probably be fine with this dish. If you really like them and have them, don't go out and buy a box of cornmeal. You can just use that. This is boiling, so you could do this with a whisk. You have to stir it when you're pouring it in, and it's nice to get the cornmeal with it. Come on. It gets thick so fast that it just kind of fills the whisk up, and the whisk doesn't last long. So my good old wooden spoon seems to be the best tool for me making this. Okay. And you got to stir and stir and stir. The way you can tell if it's done is it starts to pull away from the sides of the pan. It gets really thick. I don't really make polenta. I buy it in a tube. And I forgot to bring that tonight, but it's a tube about this long. It's in the pasta section. This is the danger, is as it thickens, it's like Yellowstone Park. You got to stay out of the way and turn it down just a little. Some people cook their polenta in the oven. I've never done it, but it seems like a great idea because then you don't have to go through all this commotion. The stuff in the tube, it's probably not quite as tasty as what you make. And you're going to see I'm going to add Parmesan and olive oil to this. But if you just slice it and heat it and then put the stuff over it, it works. And for those times when you don't have time, because really this is a fast meal, that dish cooks quickly. It simmers for 20 minutes and then I'm going to put some greens in it for another 20 minutes, but you don't have to pay attention to it. So it's a pretty fast meal. It's also a one-dish meal. I love one-dish meals. It's got everything. It's got the polenta underneath, which is a grain. It's got beans and a green and a red. So you've got all your vegetables, and the beans and the corn act as a complete protein or form a complete protein. So it's a really decent meal that's not a lot of fuss, not terribly expensive, and as I said, it's my favorite. I'm fussy about Parmesan. I'm not fussy about a lot of things, but I'm fussy about Parmesan, and I want the kind that comes to the store in a great big wheel and they cut it there. And not very many stores do that because it's a pain to cut those great big wheels, but that's that's the Parmesan with the really, really good flavor. And this is from a store. What you do is you paw through what they've cut, and you find it with a rind only on one side, one end, because sometimes they have two ends and there's not as much cheese. I mean, this is my frugality in buying Parmesan. It's this is still wrapped in plastic, which I'll talk about in a minute. But it's soft enough. Sometimes Parmesan is really, really hard, and it's really, really hard to grate. And don't buy it grated. Grated Parmesan just doesn't have good flavor. Even if you buy an American Parmesan, still grate it because I don't know, it just loses its flavor when it's been grated for a long time. The other thing is wrap your cheese in wax paper or parchment, because I don't know if you've ever bought some cheese at a store and you bring it home and it's in plastic. And it hasn't gone bad, it isn't moldy, but it has this really icky, tired taste. That doesn't happen when it's wrapped properly. And some cheeses come in I've never seen the paper by itself, but it's kind of a special paper that has a lot of holes in it. This is getting very thick, not thick enough, but thick. Okay, I'm going to wrap up my cheese in wax paper, and then if you put this, in a plastic container or in a Ziploc, as long as the plastic and the cheese aren't touching, you're okay. Afraid of burning this table. I don't know if you can tell the difference in when it left, but it's gotten thicker. These tomatoes have gotten softer, and what we need to do is put in the chickpeas. Now, if you're not crazy about chickpeas, use Great Northerns or whatever else other kind of beans you like. Probably not black beans. So black beans are real sweet and take the whole thing in another direction. But I think any, white navy beans or what other kind of beans? Great Northerns are my favorite. And you can cook your own beans. They'll even be better than this. This is lacinato kale, and I'll show you some in just a sec, but I want to get the greens going. I mean, I've already told you a lot of ways to make this whole thing faster if you want to. If you want to make it really fast, use spinach, because spinach just wilts almost immediately. I expect you know by now they're all different kinds of kale. This kale is Tuscan, black, lacinato, and I guess that those are the only names I know, but any of those names might turn up at the grocery store. Kale has a really tough stem that you don't want in your dish. And the easiest way, I guess, is You get just about the whole thing. And if you've got some left that you don't want, you can just pull it. But usually after you've pulled off that first bit, that's fine. And then it's another speed thing. If you want it to cook faster, cut it smaller. If you don't care, cut it bigger. You can see I kind of rolled it up. That's just an easy way to cut leaves that are kind of thin. Again, this is just a matter of taste. Losing my spoon. This dish has a lot of really homely things in it, but it's really pretty. The dark green of the kale and the red, that's why I use diced tomatoes rather than the petite dice, is because it just looks pretty. And white beans look pretty in it. Doesn't matter if they're chickpeas or other white beans. They all look pretty. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to go back to my polenta, and I'm going to gussy it up a little bit. I've got about a half cup of Parmesan that I grated this afternoon. And you don't have to do this, but it makes it taste better. And about a tablespoon of decent olive oil. It doesn't have to be $1 million olive oil, but it has to be extra virgin. And the stuff from California is pretty good. Okay. I love my blue bowl. I think we used my blue bowl last time too. I don't care what. This is still a little bit thin, but we don't care. The reason I'm doing this is I want it to peek around the edges of the bowl. And then I grease this loaf pan, and depending on how much you have left, but put it into a dish because it'll get real solid, and then you can slice it to do like my grandma did and fry it for breakfast. And it's really good. You can chop it up in little cubes and scramble an egg with it. And that's when you get that nice Parmesan flavor. Okay, I think I'll just turn that off, put that away. This isn't real soupy when it's done. And there you put some Parmesan on it. And go to your fresh basil that's growing on your counter. I don't know if you've bought this way. It's hydroponically grown, although there is some dirt in there. And you buy it at the store like this in kind of a cellophane cone, and then you keep it in water. And usually you only get one, so it can go in a glass. But for some reason there were two in the cone I bought, so I scored and had to put it in a bigger container. But you know, basil is really delicate, and chopping it up makes it black, and it's just not as pretty as it could be. So it's like lettuce. They tell you to tear lettuce when you're making a salad. Tear this, and getting a pretty big piece, nobody's going to complain, I don't think. Doesn't that look good? I could sit down and eat this right now. All right, there you have it. My favorite vegetarian dish is when you live alone, you eat leftovers a lot. And I can eat this 4 days in a row and not get tired of it. So, okay, here you've got chickpeas, kale in a spicy pomodoro sauce over polenta. I want you to make it. Come to the library and pick up a kit with the ingredients. And I'll see you next time on Trial by Flavor.